Cuneiform, hieroglyphs, proto-Indus symbols, and oracle bones, they are more than just marks scratched into clay, stone, or bone. They are the first bridges between fleeting thought and permanent memory, between the chaos of human experience and the order imposed by civilization. I often find myself tracing the arc of these earliest scripts, imagining the hands that pressed a reed into soft clay or chiseled sacred symbols into temple walls, and feeling the weight of what they achieved. This was humanity's first attempt to arrest time, to wrest permanence from an impermanent world. Before writing, memory was fragile, stories were oral, and transactions were ephemeral. With writing, humans began to impose structure on life, to record, to legislate, to worship, to aspire. I think about Sumer, the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, where a new form of communication was born out of necessity. Farmers needed to track grain, shepherds needed to count livestock, merchants needed to record debts, and priests needed to chronicle offerings to their gods. At first, these were simple clay tokens, small spheres, discs, and shapes pressed into mud to represent quantities. Imagine a farmer holding a handful of these tokens, each a tiny, tangible embodiment of value and agreement. They were the ancestors of numbers, the first hints that human thought could be externalized, codified, and trusted beyond immediate perception. Those tokens alone were revolutionary. They were the first tangible proof that we could hold our intentions in our hands and make them endure. And yet, necessity alone does not fully explain the leap from tokens to cuneiform. Somewhere, a Sumerian mind took the bold step of abstraction, of turning physical tokens into symbols impressed onto clay tablets. These wedge-shaped impressions, cuneiform, named for the Latin cunus, meaning wedge, allowed not just counting, but the recording of words, events, and laws. The transformation was monumental. A merchant could now document a transaction that would outlive both parties. A king could record a decree that could govern generations. A scribe could capture the subtleties of language itself, from prayers to poetry. I can almost feel the energy in those city-states, the air thick with the sounds of clay being pressed, reeds being sharpened, and minds grappling with the sheer possibility of what writing could achieve. Travel eastward and one finds a parallel but distinct achievement: Egyptian hieroglyphs. Here, writing was not just practical, but sacred. Hieroglyphs adorned temples and tombs, carved into walls with meticulous care. Each symbol carried layers of meaning, merging phonetics, visual imagery, and spiritual significance. The inscriptions recorded not only transactions and decrees, but the very essence of divine order. Pharaohs used writing to assert their legitimacy. Priests used it to communicate with the gods, and ordinary people, though rarely literate, experienced these symbols as a constant presence, walls and monuments speaking to them of power, duty, and eternity. I imagine standing in the shadows of a massive temple, tracing the intricate carvings with my fingers, realizing that these were not merely decorative, they were tools of control, education, and memory. Writing became a sacred bridge between the human and the divine, between life and the afterlife. Meanwhile, in the Indus Valley, proto-writing emerged in a more enigmatic form. Hundreds of small seals and tablets bear signs that hint at commerce, administration, and perhaps belief systems, but their meanings elude us even today. We call it the proto-Indus script, yet we must mark it with caution, verify, for no scholar has definitively deciphered it. This undeciphered code embodies both the promise and the frustration of studying early writing. It reminds us that history is incomplete, that some voices are lost, and that even the most sophisticated urban civilizations may leave only tantalizing whispers of their thought. Yet the very existence of these symbols tells us that writing was not a solitary invention, but a universal human response to the pressures of complexity, trade, and governance. In China, writing took another unique trajectory. Oracle bones, usually ox scapulae or turtle plastrons, were inscribed with divinations and then heated until cracks formed, interpreted by priests to predict outcomes. This was writing born directly from ritual, a medium that intertwined the natural, the human, and the supernatural. The Shang kings, relying on these oracle bones, sought guidance on warfare, agriculture, and royal succession. I am struck by the duality here. Writing as both pragmatic tool and spiritual medium, a record of human ambition and divine inquiry. Each etched character captured a question, a fear or a hope, frozen into the hard surface of bone and preserved for millennia. Writing in all these forms was a technology of power. It codified law, recorded transactions, memorialized rulers, and transmitted knowledge across generations. In Sumer, it allowed rulers to impose order over increasingly complex societies. In Egypt, it enshrined divine and political authority. In the Indus Valley, it facilitated trade and urban coordination, even if its precise meanings remain obscure. In Shang China, it connected the earthly and the sacred, and yet it was also a humanizing force, capturing stories, myths, and poems that give us insight into the thoughts and emotions of people who lived thousands of years ago. Consider the broader implications. Before writing, human memory was fleeting. Stories transformed with each telling, and agreements relied on trust and immediate witness. Writing introduced permanence, accountability, and standardization. It allowed civilizations to plan, to predict, and to administer far beyond what any single human could remember. It enabled the rise of complex bureaucracies, trade networks spanning hundreds of miles, and legal systems that could outlast rulers. Writing is, in essence, the first tool that allowed society itself to remember, to organize, and to grow in scale and sophistication. And yet, it is also beautiful in its aesthetics, in the rhythm of wedge-shaped marks, the elegance of pictographs, and the enigmatic curves of Indus seals. I think of the scribe, perhaps a teenager apprenticed to a master, nervously pressing each sign onto clay, learning both the rules and the artistry. I think of the Egyptian priest, carving hieroglyphs deep into stone, aware that future generations might read them long after his body had returned to dust. I think of the Shang diviner, listening for the cracks in the bone, translating cosmic signs into human language. These are intimate moments, frozen in time, revealing both technical skill and profound cognitive leaps. Writing also catalyzed new forms of social differentiation. Literacy became power. Scribes held a privileged position in every major civilization. To read and write was to participate in governance, religion, and commerce in ways unavailable to the majority. Writing drew boundaries, creating literate elites, yet it also preserved knowledge for the wider society indirectly. Stories, records, and laws encoded in permanent forms allowed ordinary people to experience continuity, stability, and culture even without direct literacy. Finally, as I reflect on these early scripts, I realize that writing was more than a practical invention. It was a declaration of human ambition. It says, "We will not forget. We will assert control over nature, memory, and society. We will communicate across time." And in that, writing is deeply human, our first true attempt to leave a mark on eternity. It links us to every civilization that followed, providing a foundation for history, science, literature, law, and even philosophy. Without these marks in clay, stone, and bone, the story of humanity would be less coherent, less enduring, less rich. So tonight, as we begin this journey into writing, I invite you to imagine the first words ever etched into permanence. The clay tablet recording a grain transaction, the carved hieroglyph beseeching a god, the enigmatic Indus seal hinting at trade, the heated oracle bone predicting harvests or battle outcomes. Each is a whisper across millennia, a testament to human ingenuity, and a promise that thought can survive time itself. Writing, in its earliest forms, was the dawn of recorded human consciousness, a luminous beginning that would illuminate the rest of our shared history. And as we follow these marks, we move inevitably toward calendars, timekeeping, and the measurement of the cosmos, the next stage of civilization's awakening. Writing transformed communication, administration, and memory. From recording taxes to epic storytelling, scripts became the backbone of complex societies, creating a bridge between human thought and the permanence of record. I often imagine the first scribes at work, their fingers coated in clay or ink, meticulously pressing symbols into a medium that would endure beyond their own lifetimes. It is a profound thought. Through writing, an individual could reach across centuries, whispering their concerns, their achievements, and their very existence to distant generations. In these earliest civilizations, Sumer, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and Shang China, writing was not just a tool, it was a transformative force, reshaping the way humans perceived themselves, their societies, and the world around them. Before writing, memory was fragile and fleeting. Oral traditions preserved knowledge, but stories changed with each retelling, and complex transactions depended on trust and witness. Imagine a merchant negotiating trade across dozens of miles with no written contract, or a king attempting to administer a growing city without formal records. Every decision relied on memory, intuition, and repetition. In this context, writing was revolutionary. It allowed humans to externalize their thoughts, making them permanent, shareable, and verifiable. It was as if civilizations had finally invented a means to capture the intangible, the laws, stories, and events that defined them, and preserve it for posterity. Consider Sumer, where cuneiform emerged as the first true writing system. The story begins with clay tokens, each representing a quantity of grain or livestock. These small objects allowed early societies to track trade and surplus, but their simplicity imposed limits. Over time, these tokens evolved into abstract symbols impressed upon clay tablets, creating cuneiform. I imagine the first Sumerian scribe carefully shaping wedge-like marks into soft clay, aware that this act would allow knowledge to transcend individual memory. Each mark was a step toward abstraction, transforming a practical counting tool into a medium capable of expressing language itself. Through cuneiform, Sumerians could record laws, contracts, and myths, building a permanent record of both mundane and monumental aspects of their lives. Egypt offers a different lens through which to view writing. Hieroglyphs were both art and communication, a language that merged the symbolic and the literal. In temples and tombs, these inscriptions conveyed divine authority, chronicled royal achievements, and preserved sacred texts. The careful placement of hieroglyphs was not accidental. It was deliberate, a reflection of the Egyptian belief that words themselves held power. To inscribe a name, a prayer, or a decree was to invoke authority and guarantee continuity. I can almost see the skilled artisans chiseling these symbols into stone, aware that their work would speak across generations, guiding kings, priests, and citizens alike. Writing in Egypt was a tool of governance, a medium of religion, and a mark of civilization itself. The Indus Valley presents a tantalizing mystery. Thousands of seals and tablets bear symbols that hint at a complex system of communication, yet we cannot fully interpret them. Scholars refer to this as the proto-Indus script. Verify. Despite its undeciphered status, the very existence of these symbols signals a sophisticated society capable of trade, administration, and possibly even ritual. I picture merchants pressing seals onto clay, marking goods with a unique identity, or officials recording transactions in bustling urban centers like Mohenjo-Daro. The precision of these symbols suggests deliberate design and standardization, pointing to shared understanding and structured organization within these ancient cities. Though silent to us, they testify to the universality of writing as a human response to complexity. In Shang China, writing took a spiritual and divinatory form. Oracle bones, often ox scapulae or turtle plastrons, were inscribed with questions posed to ancestors or deities. Once heated, the bones would crack, and the patterns were interpreted to predict outcomes of harvests, battles, or succession. This fusion of writing and ritual illustrates writing's multifaceted role: pragmatic, spiritual, and political. Each etched character captured a concern or hope, a deliberate act to reach beyond the human into the divine. I imagine the Shang kings and their diviners listening intently for cracks, translating the divine message into decisions that shaped the kingdom. Writing in this context was inseparable from authority, belief, and cosmic order. Writing's transformative power extended beyond administration and divination. It enabled the recording of law, allowing rulers to codify rules and ensure justice. Hammurabi's code in Mesopotamia is perhaps the most famous early example. Etched onto stone, the code communicated expectations, penalties, and social norms in a way that oral tradition could never achieve. Similarly, Egyptian scribes inscribed decrees on temple walls, ensuring continuity of rule and religious observance. Writing was, in every sense, an instrument of organization, allowing societies to function on scales previously unimaginable. It also facilitated trade. Contracts, receipts, and inventories were recorded, reducing disputes and enhancing economic complexity. Beyond practicality, writing became a medium for culture and imagination. Sumerian epics, Egyptian myths, and Indus symbols preserved stories of creation, divine intervention, and human heroism. Written language captured emotion, ideology, and moral thought, enabling civilizations to communicate their values across space and time. Through these texts, we glimpse the fears, aspirations, and creativity of people who lived thousands of years ago. Writing became more than a tool. It became a mirror reflecting human experience, a way to assert identity, memory, and cultural coherence. Scribal culture itself was transformative. Literacy was not universal. It created an elite class of trained individuals who held access to power. Scribes managed records, advised rulers, and preserved knowledge, ensuring that writing served both governance and society. Training a scribe required years of apprenticeship, instilling precision, discipline, and intellectual rigor. In this sense, writing was not just a technology, but a profession, a social institution shaping the structure of early civilizations. Moreover, writing allowed societies to transcend geography and lifespan. With inscriptions on stone, tablets, and bones, knowledge was no longer confined to memory or immediate experience. Civilizations could administer vast territories, plan large-scale projects, and maintain records that outlasted rulers and generations. This permanence fostered stability and continuity, while simultaneously offering a framework for innovation. The capacity to document events and ideas is, in many ways, what distinguishes civilization from simpler societies. As I reflect on the origins of writing, I am struck by its duality: functional yet artistic, pragmatic yet spiritual, individual yet societal. Each form, cuneiform, hieroglyphs, proto-Indus symbols, and oracle bones, embodies a distinct human attempt to impose order on experience, to reach across time, and to assert meaning. These early scripts capture the human desire not merely to survive, but to understand, to organize, and to be remembered. They are the foundation upon which later innovations in literature, philosophy, science, and governance were built. Tonight, as we begin this episode, I invite you to imagine the first inscriptions. The wedge pressed into clay, the chisel carving sacred symbols, the seal marking a traded good, the incised oracle bone predicting the future. Each is a whisper across millennia, a testament to human ingenuity, and a promise that thought can survive time itself. Writing, in its earliest forms, was the dawn of recorded human consciousness, illuminating the path from chaotic memory to structured knowledge, and paving the way for calendars, astronomy, and the measurement of time, the next stage of civilization's awakening. Long before the first cuneiform tablet was pressed into clay, before hieroglyphs adorned temple walls, before oracle bones were etched with questions to the heavens, human societies faced a profound problem: how to remember. Not stories, not myths, not oral histories, but the day-to-day details that govern survival, commerce, and social order. How many sheep did I lend to my neighbor? How many jars of grain were delivered to the temple last harvest? Which debts are paid, and which remain outstanding? These questions were crucial in early settlements, where resources were scarce and cooperation was essential. Without a reliable system of memory, human communities could not have grown beyond small bands. And so the earliest civilizations invented what might seem deceptively simple: tokens, small objects shaped from clay or bone, each representing an item, a quantity, or a transaction. I like to imagine the hands that held these tokens, the deliberate care with which each shape was formed. A small sphere for a jar of grain, a cone for a lamb, a disc for a measure of oil. Each token was tangible, a miniature representation of value and agreement. In those earliest moments, human thought took physical form. You could hold a number, weigh it in your hands, arrange it, and pass it on to another. These tokens were not just tools, they were proof. They told a story without words. A bundle of tokens communicated a farmer's harvest to a temple accountant. A sealed collection could confirm a trade across miles. It was as if humans had invented their first portable memory. The sophistication of these systems is often underestimated. Scholars have found collections of tokens dating back thousands of years, carefully grouped in small envelopes of clay. Their organization was intentional: spheres with spheres, cones with cones, arranged in neat order. The sheer attention to detail suggests that these early humans understood more than just quantity. They understood categories, classification, and abstraction. Each token was both practical and symbolic. It was a representation of something real, yet it also demanded cognitive effort to interpret, to remember, and to communicate. Consider the economic implications. In a settlement where grain, cattle, and oil were the main currencies of survival, keeping track of these commodities was vital. Mistakes could mean famine, conflict, or social instability. A token for a goat was not just a number. It was a promise, a liability, a record of responsibility. In temples and granaries, collections of tokens allowed administrators to plan, to allocate, and to prevent shortages. These small objects formed the backbone of early economic systems, enabling human societies to grow more complex than simple hunter-gatherer bands. The archaeological record reveals a fascinating progression. Initially, tokens were simple geometric shapes: spheres, cones, discs, cylinders. But over time, more specialized forms emerged. Some indicated specific types of animals, others denoted measures of grain or oil. The shapes themselves became a language, an early script without words. I often pause to think about what it meant to live in that world, to interact with these objects daily, to understand the codes they represented, to trust that a small piece of clay could faithfully communicate value across distance and time. It was the beginning of literacy in its most literal sense, the ability to read, interpret, and act upon a record of human intention. These tokens were more than just accounting tools. They were instruments of social cohesion. By standardizing the way transactions were recorded, they allowed communities to trust one another. Trade could occur between strangers. Temples could oversee agricultural surpluses with fairness. Leaders could distribute resources without fear of mismanagement. In this sense, tokens were a form of governance. They embodied rules, expectations, and agreements before formal law existed. They were the invisible threads that held society together. Yet these systems were not static. As settlements grew, the limitations of physical tokens became apparent. You could carry only so many. The complexity of transactions was increasing. The need for permanence was pressing. This drove innovation. At some point, someone had the insight to transfer the abstract idea represented by a token onto a more durable and compact medium: clay tablets. By impressing shapes into clay, humans created records that could survive time, that could be transported, archived, and referenced. The token system was the seed. Cuneiform was the tree that grew from it. I find it remarkable how universal this invention appears to be. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, from the Indus Valley to early China, societies recognized the same need: a reliable record of resources, obligations, and agreements. While the shapes, materials, and uses varied, the underlying principle was the same. Human beings were inventing ways to externalize memory, to make thought tangible, and to communicate across both space and time. Each culture, independently yet with strikingly similar logic, reached for the same solution: a token, a mark, a symbol, a record. Tokens also reveal something about human cognition. They suggest an ability for abstraction, the capacity to see one thing as a representation of another and to manipulate ideas in the mind. A small cone could represent a lamb. A disc could represent a jar of oil. Humans were beginning to think symbolically, to understand the relationship between signifier and signified, a foundational skill for language, mathematics, and writing. In this way, these small objects are not merely artifacts. They are evidence of the emergence of complex thought. The social implications cannot be overstated. Tokens allowed individuals to participate in shared economic and religious systems. They enabled a form of accountability. They created a class of specialists, those who understood the system, who could count, record, and verify. In many ways, these early accountants, priests, or scribes were the first professionals. They wielded knowledge as power, managing the flow of resources and information that kept society functioning. Without tokens and record-keeping, the hierarchical structures, trade networks, and early bureaucracies that defined ancient civilizations would have been impossible. And there is a poetic dimension as well. These humble pieces of clay or bone carry with them a story, a glimpse into the daily lives of people thousands of years ago. Each token is a message, a fragment of human intention, a silent witness to the emergence of civilization. They are the first tangible link in the long chain that leads to writing, literature, and recorded history. When I handle these artifacts in museums or in archaeological reports, I feel a profound connection to those early humans, an intimate sense of continuity across millennia. As I reflect on early tokens and record-keeping, I see the beginning of a chain reaction. One innovation leads to another. Tokens become tablets, tablets become scripts, scripts become literature, law, and administrative systems. Each step builds on the last, a cumulative process of invention and adaptation. Early humans were not only surviving, they were laying the intellectual and organizational foundations for cities, states, and empires. Every transaction recorded, every sheep counted, every jar of grain accounted for, was a step toward civilization itself. Tonight, as we trace this evolution, I invite you to imagine holding a token in your hand. Feel its weight. Consider its purpose. Understand that it is more than clay or bone. It is memory, law, promise, and thought made tangible. In these tokens, we see the earliest whispers of human ingenuity, the first conscious attempt to impose order on society, and the first steps toward the remarkable achievement we now call writing. From these modest beginnings, the vast tapestry of human record, administration, and culture begins to unfold. Cuneiform. The very word evokes wedges pressed into clay, the first whispers of human civilization etched into permanence. Yet to understand its profound significance, we must first step back and consider the journey that led to it. Long before the first Sumerian scribe pressed a reed into soft clay, the world was a place of fleeting memory. Transactions, agreements, and events existed only in the minds of those who witnessed them. A harvest could be tallied, a trade could be made, but the permanence of these actions was fragile. One misremembered transaction, one forgotten debt, and the delicate fabric of early society could fray. It was in response to this fundamental need for memory and order that cuneiform was born, a system that allowed humans to externalize thought, to codify action, and to create a shared record that transcended time. In the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates, the Sumerians faced a growing challenge. Their settlements were expanding, trade networks stretching across hundreds of miles, and religious and political institutions becoming increasingly complex. Tokens in clay envelopes, while ingenious, could no longer satisfy the demands of bureaucracy, trade, and governance. Someone needed a better way to record not just quantities, but the very words and ideas associated with human activity. And so, the leap from pictograph to abstract symbol occurred. It was a cognitive revolution as much as a technical one. I imagine the first scribe, sitting cross-legged on the floor of a small mud brick home, reed in hand, pressing shapes into soft clay, aware that this act would resonate across millennia. Cuneiform began as pictographs, images representing tangible objects, a fish, a jar, a sheaf of wheat. Each symbol was direct, almost literal, capturing the essence of what it represented. But as the needs of administration and communication grew, the pictographs evolved. They became abstracted, wedge-shaped marks pressed into clay with a stylus, enabling more complex ideas to be expressed. These wedges, arranged in systematic patterns, were not just images. They were symbols capable of representing sounds, numbers, and even entire words or concepts. This abstraction allowed Sumerians to record law, trade, taxation, and literature with unprecedented precision. The implications of this evolution are staggering. Suddenly it was possible to write not only about what had occurred, but what should occur. Leaders could issue decrees, priests could record rituals, merchants could formalize contracts, and families could document inheritances. A tablet could list debts owed and payments made, ensuring accountability and continuity. Cuneiform allowed for standardization in a way that oral memory never could, creating an infrastructure for trust, governance, and societal cohesion. It was a technology of order in an increasingly complex world. I often imagine the bustling streets of Uruk, where cuneiform first flourished. Clay tablets, some small enough to hold in one hand, others large and monumental, lined the shelves of temples and administrative buildings. Scribes bent over their work, pressing symbols with meticulous care, aware that accuracy was paramount. One mistake could misrepresent a transaction, distort a record, or undermine authority. The act of writing itself required training, discipline, and precision, a reflection of the seriousness with which Sumerians approached the power of the written word. Cuneiform was not static. Over centuries, it adapted and transformed to meet the needs of Sumerian society. Initially used for accounting, it expanded to encompass legal codes, treaties, letters, and literature. One can almost see the gradual layering of complexity, simple pictographs giving way to phonetic signs, ideograms, and syllabic symbols. The script became a flexible instrument, capable of capturing abstract concepts, personal expression, and cultural memory. In this sense, cuneiform was not just a tool, it was a medium for civilization itself. The social implications were profound. Literacy became specialized. Scribes, trained over years of apprenticeship, occupied a privileged position in society. They were custodians of knowledge, mediators between rulers and the populace, and guardians of history. Their work ensured that the actions of kings, priests, and merchants could be recorded and remembered. In essence, cuneiform created a bridge between individual cognition and collective memory, enabling society to function on scales previously unimaginable. Without these trained scribes, the intricate bureaucracy, trade networks, and religious institutions of Sumer would have collapsed under their own complexity. Cuneiform also fostered intellectual growth. It allowed Sumerians to compose epic tales and religious texts that would endure for millennia. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known literary works, would never have been possible without this system. Through writing, stories, beliefs, and philosophies could be formalized, shared, and preserved. It was a conduit for cultural transmission, allowing successive generations to learn from the past, aspire to ideals, and understand the human experience. The script was a mirror reflecting the values, fears, and ambitions of Sumerian society. The practical applications of cuneiform extended far beyond administration. Merchants used it to track shipments of goods across long distances. Temples used it to record offerings and ritual obligations. Kings employed it to codify laws and assert authority. It created transparency and accountability in economic, religious, and political spheres, providing a foundation for trust in increasingly complex urban environments. Without this innovation, the social fabric of Sumer would have been fragile, vulnerable to miscommunication, fraud, or disorder. I often marvel at the physicality of cuneiform. The wedges pressed into soft clay were deliberate and intentional. Each stroke required care, an understanding of both form and meaning. Unlike modern writing on paper or digital text, these inscriptions were tactile, permanent, and durable. Some tablets survived floods, fires, and millennia buried in mud, carrying messages from the past into our hands. There is something profoundly human about this act. Pressing thought into material, shaping meaning with one's own hands, leaving a tangible trace of existence. Cuneiform also influenced subsequent writing systems. Its principles of abstraction, phonetic representation, and symbolic encoding informed later scripts across Mesopotamia and beyond. Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian civilizations adapted cuneiform for their own languages, demonstrating its flexibility and enduring utility. The very idea of recording language visually, encoding both sound and meaning, would echo across continents and centuries, eventually shaping alphabets and writing systems that underpin modern literacy. Reflecting on this, I realized that cuneiform was more than a technical achievement. It was a cognitive and cultural revolution. It required humans to conceptualize representation, to separate symbol from object, to think abstractly about language and numbers. It transformed not only the way societies functioned, but also the way humans understood their own capacity for memory, expression, and permanence. With cuneiform, humans learned to externalize thought, creating a shared repository of knowledge that could endure long after any individual's life ended. Tonight, as we trace the evolution of writing, I invite you to imagine the first Sumerian scribe at work, the reed in hand, clay tablet on the lap, pressing the wedge-shaped marks with deliberate care. Each mark is a statement of intent, a record of commerce, a preservation of memory. These first cuneiform symbols are not merely practical. They are the seeds of civilization itself. Through them, humans discovered the power to shape society, communicate across generations, and record the ephemeral into permanence. Cuneiform represents the beginning of an enduring human journey. The journey from thought to symbol, from memory to record, from ephemeral action to enduring history. When I think of ancient writing, the image that often comes to mind is not a clay tablet or a bone token, but the intricate flowing symbols of Egyptian hieroglyphs. These signs, carved with painstaking care into the walls of temples and tombs, are at once art and administration, sacred and practical, mortal and eternal. Unlike the more utilitarian cuneiform of Sumer, hieroglyphs existed in a space that bridged human action and divine order. They were a tool of governance, a medium of ritual, and a visual manifestation of cultural identity. To witness them is to witness a civilization asserting its permanence against the fleeting passage of time. Hieroglyphs began as pictorial representations, but unlike simple images, each symbol carried layered meaning. A bird might represent a literal creature, a sound, or even an idea, such as freedom or divinity. The combination of phonetic, ideographic, and symbolic elements allowed Egyptian scribes to convey complex religious, administrative, and literary content. Writing in Egypt was never merely transactional, it was ideological. Pharaohs employed hieroglyphs to assert divine legitimacy, inscribing their names, deeds, and decrees onto stone so that even the passage of centuries could not erase them. Temples were lined with these carvings, narrating myths, recording offerings, and outlining sacred rituals. Tombs, meanwhile, immortalized the deceased, ensuring that names, titles, and accomplishments survived into eternity. I often imagine the first scribe entering a tomb, palette in hand, brush or chisel poised, contemplating the immense responsibility of translating human intention into sacred symbols. Every stroke mattered. Mistakes could be more than an administrative error. They could threaten the spiritual efficacy of the inscription. A hieroglyph was not just a letter or a word. It was an act of preservation, a bridge between the human and divine, a means of securing order in both this world and the next. To carve or paint these symbols was to participate in a deeply spiritual and civic process, to contribute to the memory of the society, and to anchor human action within the cosmos. The function of hieroglyphs extended far beyond religious expression. They were integral to administration and governance. Pharaohs, officials, and priests recorded decrees, tax records, census data, and inventories of offerings and resources. In a vast and stratified society, keeping track of labor, tribute, and trade was essential. Hieroglyphs provided a permanent, verifiable medium for these records. They ensured continuity, enabling complex governance over an expansive territory along the Nile. Imagine the temple scribes, meticulously cataloging grain stored in the granaries, livestock delivered as tax, or resources allocated for monumental building projects. Each symbol was a node in an intricate network of accountability and societal coordination. At the same time, hieroglyphs were inseparable from religious and funerary practices. The Egyptians believed that a person's name and deeds had to be recorded to secure their existence in the afterlife. Tombs were filled with inscriptions of spells, prayers, and mythological narratives designed to guide the deceased safely through the duat, the Egyptian underworld. The Book of the Dead, one of the most famous collections of these texts, demonstrates the interplay of art, literature, and religion, all encoded in hieroglyphs. Through these symbols, individuals were linked to divine forces, and the human experience was mapped onto the cosmic order. Hieroglyphs, therefore, were a medium through which humans could negotiate their mortality and participate in eternity. The aesthetic quality of hieroglyphs cannot be overstated. Each symbol was carefully designed, often with attention to proportion, symmetry, and visual harmony. This was not writing in the abstract sense. It was writing as a form of art. The scribe had to balance meaning with visual appeal, blending precision with beauty. In this sense, Egyptian writing transcended mere function. It was an expression of cultural values, a reflection of a society that revered order, harmony, and continuity. Even today, centuries after the last hieroglyph was carved, one can feel the meticulous care and reverence embedded in each symbol. Hieroglyphs also fostered a specialized literacy. Not everyone could read or write. Education was largely confined to scribes, priests, and elite officials. These individuals held knowledge as power, controlling the flow of information, law, and culture. Training a scribe could take years, often beginning in childhood, and included mastering hundreds of symbols, understanding grammatical rules, and learning the art of visual composition. Scribes were the intermediaries between the rulers and the populace, between the divine and the mortal. In many ways, they were the linchpins of Egyptian civilization, preserving knowledge and ensuring continuity across generations. The use of hieroglyphs also reveals the Egyptians' profound understanding of the relationship between writing and memory. In a culture deeply concerned with time, cycles, and the afterlife, writing was a means of preserving existence itself. Every temple wall, every tomb inscription, every monumental text was a strategy for defying forgetfulness. It codified not just human actions, but ideals, values, and cosmological understanding. Hieroglyphs transformed ephemeral events into enduring narratives, allowing individuals and society to project themselves into eternity. Moreover, the system was remarkably adaptable. Hieroglyphs could be written in rows or columns, left to right or right to left, depending on aesthetic and spatial considerations. They could be carved into stone, painted on walls, or written on papyrus. This flexibility demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of both the physical medium and the cognitive demands of communication. The Egyptians were not only recording information, they were designing a system that could endure, that could function across different contexts and purposes, from sacred ritual to bureaucratic record. Hieroglyphs also played a role in diplomacy and cross-cultural interaction. During periods of trade or conquest, Egyptian scribes recorded treaties, inventories, and correspondences that reflected the civilization's extensive networks. Writing allowed the state to communicate with distant regions, manage resources, and assert influence. It was both a practical and symbolic tool, representing the reach of Egyptian power and the sophistication of its administration. Reflecting on Egyptian hieroglyphs, I am struck by their duality. They were utilitarian yet sacred, bureaucratic yet artistic, mortal yet eternal. They illustrate the remarkable capacity of human societies to integrate multiple functions into a single system of writing, to govern, to worship, to memorialize, and to communicate. Each hieroglyph is more than a symbol. It is a story, a contract, a prayer, a reflection of human ambition and ingenuity. Tonight, as we trace the evolution of writing in Egypt, I invite you to imagine standing in the shadow of a temple wall, your eyes tracing the intricate carvings, your fingers brushing against the stone. Each symbol is a voice from the past, telling stories of kings and commoners, of gods and mortals, of commerce, ritual, and ideology. Hieroglyphs embody the human desire for permanence, order, and meaning. They remind us that writing is not only a practical tool, but a profound statement about the nature of civilization itself, a bridge between fleeting life and enduring legacy, between human endeavor and the divine cosmos. As we prepare to move beyond Egypt, these hieroglyphs guide us to the next frontier, the mysterious proto-Indus script, an undeciphered yet tantalizing system that hints at trade, governance, and social complexity. Verify. From the sacred carvings along the Nile, we will travel east to the enigmatic symbols of the Indus Valley, exploring how writing continued to evolve, adapt, and shape human societies across continents. The Indus Valley civilization, sprawling across what is now modern-day Pakistan and northwest India, presents one of the most fascinating enigmas in human history. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa rose with remarkable planning, featuring grid streets, sophisticated drainage, and uniform brickwork. Yet, despite these achievements, one crucial aspect of their society remains tantalizingly out of reach: their writing. Known to scholars as the proto-Indus script verify, these undeciphered symbols appear on thousands of seals, tablets, and pottery fragments, hinting at a complex system of communication. And yet, despite decades of study, the script remains a mystery, refusing to yield its secrets. I often imagine the scribes of Harappa pressing symbols into small steatite seals, carefully crafting patterns that would identify goods, mark ownership, or record transactions. Each symbol was deliberate, consistent, and standardized across the civilization, suggesting not casual doodling, but a structured form of writing. Unlike the large monumental inscriptions of Egypt or the clay tablets of Sumer, these marks were compact, portable, and likely used in trade or administration. I picture a merchant pressing a seal into wet clay to certify a shipment of grain, the impression serving as both a practical record and a mark of authority. It is remarkable to consider that, thousands of years ago, humans were using writing not just for religious or political purposes, but as a functional tool to organize daily life and commerce. The proto-Indus script is both tantalizing and frustrating. Its symbols are striking: geometric shapes, animal motifs, abstract patterns, often combined in sequences that hint at linguistic rules. Some inscriptions are incredibly short, consisting of only a few characters, while others stretch across larger tablets or seals. Despite their consistency, the lack of bilingual texts, akin to the Rosetta Stone for Egyptian hieroglyphs, has left scholars in the dark. We cannot yet confidently assign meaning to these symbols. We do not know the language they recorded, whether it was spoken by the common populace, the elite, or an administrative class. And yet, their very existence tells us something profound. The people of the Indus Valley were engaging in complex record-keeping, governance, and communication that required standardization, abstraction, and shared understanding. One of the most striking features of the Indus script is its connection to trade and administration. Many inscriptions appear on seals used for economic transactions, often depicting animals, titles, or marks of authenticity. This suggests a society deeply invested in commerce, organization, and accountability. Traders could certify their goods, authorities could track ownership, and cities could regulate exchange. Even without knowing the precise meaning of the symbols, it is clear that they were functional tools for managing complex social and economic interactions. I imagine bustling market stalls, merchants stamping their goods with small polished seals, each impression representing trust, authority, and verification across distance. The urban complexity of the Indus Valley civilization reinforces the need for such a system. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro had public granaries, advanced drainage, and sophisticated civic infrastructure. Planning at this scale required coordination, record-keeping, and communication. Writing, even in the form of short, undeciphered symbols, likely played a critical role in ensuring the smooth operation of these cities. Without a method to track goods, labor, and resources, such achievements would have been nearly impossible. The script, therefore, was more than a curiosity. It was a functional technology that enabled urban civilization itself. Decipherment, however, is a formidable challenge. Unlike cuneiform or hieroglyphs, the Indus script lacks lengthy texts that could reveal grammar or syntax. There are no Rosetta Stones, no bilingual inscriptions, no surviving literary tradition. Scholars have attempted statistical analyses, comparisons with contemporary languages, and cryptographic approaches, yet consensus remains elusive. Some propose that the script represents a full language. Others suggest it is a mnemonic system or a set of administrative symbols rather than a complete writing system. This uncertainty adds to the allure. The Indus script is a silent witness, inviting speculation, interpretation, and the tantalizing hope of eventual understanding. I find it compelling that these undeciphered symbols reflect both human ingenuity and the limits of our knowledge. Even without fully understanding them, we can infer their purpose, trade, governance, and social complexity. Each seal, each tablet, each mark tells us that the Indus people were not merely surviving. They were organizing, planning, and creating structures that would allow their civilization to thrive. It is a reminder that writing, even when unreadable to us, is a tangible expression of cognition, cooperation, and societal ambition. The aesthetic dimension of the script is also striking. Many inscriptions incorporate animals, such as unicorn-like motifs, elephants, and tigers, alongside geometric patterns. These images are not mere decoration. They may carry semantic or symbolic significance, encoding identity, authority, or social roles. In this sense, the Indus script parallels the dual function of Egyptian hieroglyphs, blending practical administration with symbolic meaning. It demonstrates that early writing was not purely functional. It was cultural, artistic, and deeply integrated into the worldview of the people who used it. Despite our inability to read the script, its distribution reveals patterns of use and standardization. Similar symbols appear across distant cities, suggesting a shared system recognized by multiple urban centers. This standardization implies governance structures, trade networks, and a collective cultural understanding. In effect, the Indus script testifies to the interconnectedness of ancient cities, the sophistication of administration, and the cognitive achievements of early humans. Even in silence, these symbols speak volumes about human ingenuity and societal complexity. The mystery of the proto-Indus script also serves as a reminder of the fragility of knowledge. Unlike the enduring cuneiform tablets or Egyptian hieroglyphs, which we can read and interpret, the Indus symbols resist comprehension. They highlight the contingency of history, the way knowledge can be lost, languages vanish, and civilizations leave only fragments of their thought. And yet, in these fragments lies a profound insight that humans everywhere, independently, recognize the need to externalize memory, to encode their interactions, and to preserve societal knowledge. I often imagine the daily life of the people using these symbols. A craftsman impressing a seal into a clay jar, a merchant marking goods for trade, an official recording quantities of grain. Each act was deliberate, each symbol a form of communication, each tablet or seal a witness to human organization. Even without understanding the exact meaning, we see the extraordinary human capacity to invent systems that extend cognition beyond the individual and across generations. Writing in the Indus Valley, though undeciphered, is a testament to foresight, abstraction, and the drive to create order out of complexity. As I reflect on these enigmatic symbols, I am struck by their continuity with other early writing systems. Like cuneiform and hieroglyphs, the Indus script arose from practical needs, commerce, administration, governance, but evolved into a system capable of expressing complex ideas, identities, and social structures. It demonstrates the universality of writing as a human invention, a tool for memory, a medium for culture, and a bridge between individual cognition and collective society. The fact that we cannot yet decode it does not diminish its significance. It emphasizes the ingenuity of the people who created it and the challenges inherent in understanding the past. Tonight, as we trace the arc of writing from tokens to cuneiform to hieroglyphs and now to the undeciphered Indus script, I invite you to imagine the quiet, meticulous hands of Harappan scribes. Picture them pressing symbols into small, polished seals, aware that each impression carried weight, economic, social, and perhaps even spiritual. These marks are not just artifacts. They are a testament to human curiosity, intellect, and organization. They are evidence that even in the distant past, humans understood the power of recording, standardizing, and preserving knowledge. From here, our journey moves to Shang China, where writing took on a uniquely spiritual dimension through oracle bones. Unlike the functional tokens of Sumer or the aesthetic hieroglyphs of Egypt, Shang inscriptions sought to communicate with the divine, merging administration with divination. The Indus script, undeciphered and mysterious, serves as a bridge between the practical and the sacred, setting the stage for writing to explore not just human society, but the cosmos itself. In the heart of the Yellow River Valley, during the Shang dynasty, a remarkable convergence of politics, religion, and writing took shape. Here, human society began to link the practical with the spiritual in a way unseen elsewhere, through the inscriptions on oracle bones. These early divination tools, typically ox scapulae or turtle plastrons, were etched with questions for the ancestors or deities, then heated until cracks appeared, and the resulting patterns were interpreted to guide decisions. Oracle bones represent more than a method of predicting the future. They are one of the earliest surviving forms of Chinese writing and a window into how a civilization understood its relationship with the cosmos, governance, and mortality. I often imagine the scene in a Shang palace, the king, advisor, or diviner sitting in a quiet ceremonial chamber, the polished bone or shell in hand, an array of inscriptions ready to record his questions. Each stroke of the sharp tool pressed symbols into the bone, symbols that represented words, sounds, or concepts. These inscriptions were precise, deliberate, and highly standardized, reflecting both the demands of communication and the sacred weight of their purpose. Unlike the practical clay tablets of Mesopotamia or the monumental hieroglyphs of Egypt, oracle bones were immediate, ephemeral, yet meticulously preserved once inscribed. They were functional, sacred, and symbolic all at once, embodying a fusion of human ambition, faith, and pragmatism. The process of divination was as significant as the inscriptions themselves. Questions ranged from mundane concerns, weather forecasts for planting, military campaigns, or resource allocation, to profoundly spiritual or existential inquiries. Will the king recover from illness? Will the harvest succeed? Which ancestors favor or oppose a proposed action? After carving the characters, the bones were subjected to heat until they cracked. The diviner read the patterns, interpreting them as messages from the ancestors or deities, then recorded the answers alongside the original query. It was a tangible conversation with the cosmos, a dialogue in which writing served as the medium. Oracle bones illustrate a remarkable link between writing and governance. The Shang king was both political leader and spiritual intermediary, relying on divination to legitimize decisions and assert authority. By documenting queries and outcomes, writing created a record of divine sanction, effectively intertwining politics and religion. A successful divination could justify military action or policy. A failed prediction could be interpreted as a warning from ancestors. In this way, the Shang dynasty used writing not only to communicate and record, but to assert societal control, manage uncertainty, and reinforce hierarchical authority. Beyond governance, oracle bones reveal the Shang people's sophisticated understanding of time, cycles, and observation. Questions often concerned celestial phenomena, eclipses, lunar phases, and seasonal changes. Writing became a tool for tracking cosmic patterns, linking human activity to the rhythms of the universe. The inscriptions record not just social or economic concerns, but the early seeds of astronomy, calendar systems, and predictive observation. Through these marks, humans attempted to understand the natural world, align their lives with it, and secure the favor of unseen forces. The artistry of oracle bones is also striking. Each symbol, though functional, required precision and understanding of both shape and meaning. The process demanded skill, training, and deep knowledge of language, cosmology, and ritual practice. Scribes, trained specialists, recorded each query and interpretation with care, ensuring accuracy and consistency. Literacy in this context was a form of power. Those who could inscribe, interpret, and preserve the records wielded authority not only over information, but over spiritual and political outcomes. Oracle bones were instruments of memory, governance, and divine communication. These inscriptions provide us with a unique perspective on ancient Chinese society. They reveal the concerns, values, and priorities of a civilization that sought harmony between human action and cosmic order. Daily life, politics, warfare, agriculture, and spiritual practice were all mediated through these marks, creating a comprehensive snapshot of Shang society. Unlike other early writing systems that primarily recorded economic or literary content, oracle bones blur the line between the practical and the sacred, demonstrating that for the Shang communication was a bridge to the divine, as well as a tool for earthly management. The temporal dimension of oracle bones is fascinating. By dating inscriptions and cross-referencing events, Historians can reconstruct sequences of kings, battles, and natural phenomena. Each carved question serves as both a record of human intention and an observation of the natural and spiritual world. In this way, oracle bones are not merely divination tools. They are historical documents, preserving the patterns of governance, belief, and environment over centuries. They show that writing, even in its early stages, could serve multiple purposes simultaneously: practical, spiritual, and historical. I'm also struck by the continuity and influence of oracle bones. The characters etched into bone form the foundation of later Chinese writing systems, linking early divination to the evolution of one of the world's longest-lasting written traditions. The principles established in these inscriptions, symbolic representation, phonetic adaptation, standardization, echo through millennia, influencing everything from calligraphy to bureaucratic records. The act of carving symbols into a tangible medium became a template for systematic communication, cultural memory, and statecraft that persists even today. In reflecting on oracle bones, I find myself considering the human impulse that drove their creation, the desire to anticipate the future, to negotiate uncertainty, and to align human action with forces larger than oneself. Writing in this context is not neutral or utilitarian. It is a tool of agency, imagination, and understanding. Each inscription embodies hope, fear, authority, and reflection. It is a dialogue with the unknown, a record of human curiosity and reverence, and a testament to the enduring desire to comprehend and shape the world. The interplay between politics, religion, and writing in Shang China also illuminates a universal truth. Writing is never purely mechanical. Even in the earliest societies, symbols were charged with meaning beyond their immediate function. They codified social norms, facilitated governance, expressed cultural values, and mediated between the mortal and the divine. Oracle bones exemplify this synergy, demonstrating that the act of writing can transform mere observation into insight, uncertainty into guidance, and human effort into a bridge to eternity. I like to envision the legacy of these inscriptions. Thousands of years later, archaeologists unearth these bones, piecing together the life of a civilization long vanished. Every etched character tells a story of human aspiration, governance, and the pursuit of understanding. Even though the Shang people could not have imagined the modern world, their desire to communicate with the divine, to organize society, and to preserve memory resonates across millennia. Oracle bones are not just artifacts. They are evidence of humanity's enduring quest to leave a trace, to understand cause and effect, and to negotiate existence through symbols. As we reflect on Shang China, we see that writing has evolved into an instrument that mediates between practical, spiritual, and temporal concerns. From tokens counting grain to cuneiform tablets managing empires, from hieroglyphs blending art and bureaucracy to the proto-Indus script hinting at trade and governance, oracle bones add another dimension, the cosmic and divine. This convergence of writing, politics, religion, and observation highlights the versatility and power of human communication. Writing is no longer simply record-keeping. It becomes a way to shape thought, influence action, and align human life with forces larger than oneself. Tonight, as we trace this journey, I invite you to imagine a Shang diviner interpreting cracks on a bone, inscriptions meticulously carved alongside each query. Each symbol carries weight, political, spiritual, and practical. Through oracle bones, humans made the intangible tangible, bridging uncertainty and authority, earthly life and divine guidance. The Shang dynasty demonstrates that writing is a profound human invention, capable of navigating not only memory and administration but also faith, foresight, and existential inquiry. From here, the story of writing continues to expand. The integration of literacy into broader social, religious, and administrative practices, and the eventual creation of literature, legal codes, and historical records. Oracle bones illustrate the extraordinary human impulse to communicate across space, time, and even the unseen, setting the stage for the remaining narratives of writing in Episode 3. Writing, at its most transformative, was never simply an artistic expression. It was an instrument of control, a silent administrator of civilization. When the first wedge-shaped impressions were pressed into damp clay in ancient Sumer, they carried within them not poetry or philosophy, but inventory. Barley, livestock, silver, wool, symbols for commodities that could now be counted, owned, and transferred with precision. This simple act of inscription marked the moment humanity began governing itself not just through speech or memory, but through text, an enduring form of accountability. In the cradle of Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates flooded and receded with stubborn rhythm, writing became the lifeline of administration. Every temple, every palace, every granary required a system to track surplus and distribution. Tokens and bullae gave way to tablets, compact, portable records that could be baked and preserved. On these clay slabs, scribes inscribed numerical notations and pictographs, recording goods owed to temples, taxes collected from farmers, wages paid to laborers, and rations distributed to soldiers. Each mark replaced a conversation. Each line of cuneiform stood in for a handshake. What once required memory and trust could now be verified through clay. This was not merely bureaucracy, it was the foundation of governance itself. Writing made institutions possible. It allowed rules to transcend rulers, records to outlive generations, and agreements to persist beyond trust. Sumerian temples, acting as both economic centers and administrative hubs, relied on writing to mediate every facet of life. Without written records, the system would have collapsed under its own complexity. With writing, it became self-sustaining. The same principle echoed through Egypt's river-fed empire. Hieroglyphs adorned the walls of temples and tombs, but on sheets of papyrus and dusty archives, they served a quieter, more practical purpose. Scribes recorded grain harvests, tallied workers on state projects, and tracked supplies for royal expeditions. In the shadow of pyramids beneath the monuments to eternity lay an invisible network of documents, the heartbeat of Egypt's administrative machine. The kingdom's stability depended not just on divine kingship or agricultural abundance, but on meticulous record-keeping. Who owed what? Who received what? Who labored and who led? The genius of writing was its neutrality. Clay and papyrus did not lie. They bore witness. As trade expanded, writing became a contract, a shield against dispute. Merchants moving between cities such as Ur, Mari, and Ebla carried written tablets sealed with cylinder stamps, identifying ownership in terms of exchange. Each seal was unique, a personal signature pressed into clay. Across the ancient Near East, this created a web of trust. Strangers could transact without speaking the same language, because writing, standardized, precise, durable, spoke for them. Through trade, writing leapt from one civilization to another. The merchants of the Indus Valley, sailing to Mesopotamian ports, carried seals marked with their own undeciphered script, verify. These tiny engraved stones functioned as passports of authenticity, linking distant cities through commerce. Even without translation, they signified legitimacy, binding economies across oceans. Writing became the thread connecting economies, a common language of exchange long before diplomacy or empire achieved the same. But writing's true evolution, its step from utility to governance, came when it entered the realm of law. In the early 2nd millennium BCE, rulers began inscribing decrees and judgments not for personal record, but for public permanence. The most iconic of these is the Code of Hammurabi, a basalt monument over 7 feet tall, covered in dense Akkadian cuneiform. It begins not with statutes, but with ideology, the king declaring himself chosen by the gods to bring justice to his people. Yet beneath the divine preamble lies the revolution, a written articulation of legal order, binding both ruler and ruled. The laws themselves range from the pragmatic to the moral, addressing theft, debt, marriage, and injury. The idea was simple, yet profound. The law should be visible, permanent, and standardized. By carving it into stone, Hammurabi ensured that justice was not the whim of kings, but the record of text. The written word gave law endurance, outlasting the men who made and interpreted it. In this way, writing became civilization's greatest equalizer, not because it made all people equal, but because it gave them a shared framework of expectation. The public display of law also transformed urban identity. In cities like Babylon, citizens could point to the stone pillar and know their rights and obligations. The text itself, though inaccessible to the illiterate, was a symbol of fairness and continuity. Writing, once confined to scribes and temples, became a civic monument, a physical embodiment of order. It separated the arbitrary from the codified, power from mere command. The same concept echoed elsewhere. In Egypt, royal decrees and tax exemptions were inscribed on temple walls, linking divine authority to bureaucratic precision. In Shang China, oracle bone inscriptions carried judicial and ritual functions, blending governance with spirituality. Even in the Indus Valley, though their script remains a mystery, the uniformity of seals and tokens suggests a system of regulation, a silent legal code written in symbols we no longer understand. Scribes stood at the center of this transformation. They were the custodians of language, the intermediaries between spoken command and written permanence. Trained in schools attached to temples and palaces, they learned to copy, calculate, and classify. Their role was both clerical and sacred. To write was to give form to authority. To record was to preserve truth. In many ways, scribes were the first civil servants, invisible architects of civilization, wielding styluses instead of swords. Yet writing's power also carried moral tension. The same system that ensured fairness could enforce inequality. The same texts that protected contracts could record debts that enslaved. Written law could standardize justice, but it could also codify hierarchy. In Mesopotamia, penalties differed for nobles, commoners, and slaves. In Egypt, only the elite learned to write, and their control of record-keeping reinforced class divisions. Writing thus became both a liberating force and an instrument of control, civilization's double-edged gift. Still, it is impossible to overstate its unifying role. Writing turned chaos into order, markets into economies, commands into governments. What began as scratches on clay to track grain became a moral compass carved in stone. Each transaction, each legal case, each scribal entry created the framework for civic trust. The written record did what no oral agreement could. It outlasted argument, emotion, and death. It allowed a society to govern not through memory, but through continuity, a chain of written accountability linking one generation to the next. Imagine a day in ancient Babylon. In the marketplace, merchants trade goods recorded on clay receipts. In the temple courtyard, priests consult written lists of offerings. In the palace archives, scribes copy decrees and correspondence. Everywhere, writing hums beneath the surface, silent, methodical, tireless. Each symbol, each tablet, each sealed document keeps the city alive. The written word is the pulse of civilization, regulating its rhythm and ensuring its survival. As the centuries unfold, this administrative writing would evolve into literature, philosophy, and science. But in its earliest form, its purpose was clear: to govern, to regulate, to preserve. Writing was the invisible infrastructure of civilization, the unseen architecture holding together vast systems of trade, taxation, law, and power. Without it, empires could not have been built. Without it, they could not have endured. By inscribing their world into clay and stone, humanity learned to govern the intangible: wealth, time, justice, and memory. And through that act, civilization learned something even greater: that permanence is the foundation of order. The same writing that tallied harvests and taxes would one day chart stars, record history, and question the meaning of existence itself. As this batch closes, we stand at the intersection of practicality and philosophy. Writing began as the language of ledgers, contracts, and law, but it was already hinting at something deeper. The urge to record is the urge to understand, to control, to remember. And from these earliest symbols of governance would grow the great chronicles of human thought. Next, the story continues, from tablets of trade and law to the words of myth and prayer. From record to revelation, writing becomes not just the instrument of governance, but the voice of civilization's soul. By the time writing had established itself as a practical tool for administration and trade, its potential for shaping culture, identity, and ideology became undeniable. Across early civilizations, from the fertile plains of Mesopotamia to the Nile River Valley, from the Indus cities to Shang China, writing evolved into a medium not only for recording, but for storytelling. It became the conduit through which humans transmitted beliefs, explained the cosmos, celebrated heroes, codified ethics, and embedded collective memory. Religious texts and epic narratives are, in many ways, the lifeblood of ancient culture, a reflection of the ideals, fears, and aspirations of the societies that produced them. I imagine the first scribe, seated in the cool shadow of a temple or palace, brush or stylus in hand, contemplating the task of inscribing sacred words onto clay, papyrus, bone, or stone. Each stroke is deliberate, each word carries weight, and each narrative encodes a worldview. These texts are more than mere stories. They are vehicles for ideology, teaching lessons about morality, social hierarchy, cosmic order, and the proper relationship between humans and the divine. They preserve and transmit not only history, but the interpretive lens through which a civilization understood itself and its place in the universe. Consider the Epic of Gilgamesh, etched in cuneiform tablets in Mesopotamia. It recounts the exploits of a semi-divine king, exploring themes of friendship, mortality, heroism, and the human quest for immortality. Beyond its narrative appeal, the epic functions as a cultural anchor, transmitting ethical norms, societal expectations, and metaphysical reflections to successive generations. Through these stories, ordinary citizens and ruling elites alike engaged with profound questions. What does it mean to live a good life? How should one confront death? What is the relationship between humans and the divine? Epic storytelling, in this sense, is inseparable from religious thought. It is ideology encoded in narrative form. Similarly, in Egypt, the pyramid texts, coffin texts, and later the Book of the Dead represent a complex interplay of ritual, belief, and narrative. These writings guided the deceased through the underworld, prescribing proper prayers, recitations, and actions to ensure safe passage and eternal life. Each text is imbued with theological insight, social instruction, and symbolic meaning. The texts reveal the values of the society, the sanctity of the pharaoh, the moral duties of the individual, the power of ritual, and the intricate cosmology that structured Egyptian life. Writing, therefore, was not merely communicative, it was transformative, shaping human perception and social order. Epic and religious narratives also served as mnemonic frameworks. In oral cultures, stories were structured to preserve memory, repeating key phrases, rhythms, and motifs. When writing entered the picture, these mnemonic devices became codified, allowing narratives to endure beyond the limits of human recollection. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, and later Shang China, scribes translated spoken tradition into permanent texts, creating a shared cultural repository. These texts became a mechanism for continuity, linking generations through a common mythology, cosmology, and set of values. They provided not only entertainment or ritual function, but a collective sense of identity. The intersection of religion, morality, and epic storytelling is particularly evident in the function of myths. Myths explain the unexplainable, creation, natural phenomena, the origins of society, and the human condition. They offer narratives that justify social structures, codify behavioral norms, and legitimize leadership. In writing these myths, ancient societies cemented cultural ideology. A king or priest commissioning such texts was not merely preserving knowledge, they were shaping how future generations would understand morality, authority, and the cosmos. Written myths are not passive artifacts. They are instruments of education, persuasion, and cultural cohesion. Prayers, another critical dimension of religious writing, illustrate the intimate connection between the individual, the community, and the divine. Whether inscribed on temple walls, etched into votive offerings, or recited from tablets, prayers codify belief into a tangible form. They provide guidance for proper ritual behavior, encode theological principles, and serve as a medium for humans to communicate with forces beyond their comprehension. The The act of writing a prayer transforms ephemeral thought into a permanent invocation, bridging the temporal and eternal. Through such inscriptions, societies preserved spiritual knowledge, reinforced hierarchies, and cultivated shared moral and ethical frameworks. I often reflect on the role of storytelling in socialization and moral education. Epic narratives and religious texts provide frameworks for understanding success, failure, virtue, and vice. Heroes embody ideals, villains reveal transgression, and gods reward or punish according to societal codes. These stories were both entertaining and instructive, guiding behavior, reinforcing norms, and offering models for emulation. Writing allowed these lessons to persist far longer than oral transmission alone could achieve, ensuring that the cultural and moral scaffolding of society endured across generations. Moreover, religious texts and epics created a shared cognitive landscape. Citizens and rulers alike could reference common stories, rituals, and symbols, aligning perception and behavior. Writing enabled standardization and consistency, reducing ambiguity in religious practice, legal expectations, and social norms. The act of recording these narratives formally established a canon, a recognized set of texts and motifs that defined the intellectual and spiritual contours of a civilization. In this way, writing is both reflective and prescriptive, preserving what was and shaping what should be. Across civilizations, epic and religious texts also reveal the interplay of local and universal concerns. While each society had unique deities, heroes, and myths, common themes recur: creation and destruction, life and death, human frailty and divine authority, order and chaos. The convergence of these motifs across time and space underscores a shared human endeavor: the attempt to comprehend existence, negotiate uncertainty, and embed human action within a larger, meaningful framework. Writing, by capturing these narratives, amplifies their power and ensures that insights, anxieties, and aspirations are communicated across generations and geographies. The aesthetic qualities of these texts cannot be overlooked. Scribes often employed elaborate layout, symbolism, and artistic embellishment to enhance the impact of the writing. Egyptian hieroglyphs, Mesopotamian cuneiform, and later Chinese script demonstrate that narrative is not only semantic but visual. The form of writing itself carries meaning, reinforcing the sacred, moral, or heroic weight of the content. This intertwining of form and function reflects a sophisticated understanding of human cognition, that symbols can evoke emotion, memory, and devotion in addition to conveying information. It is also essential to recognize the human labor embedded in these texts. Crafting a religious or epic text required years of training, meticulous attention, and adherence to convention. Scribes were cultural custodians, transmitting ideology and memory through disciplined work. In each inscription, they encode not only the content of the story, but also social hierarchies, political legitimacy, and ethical frameworks. Writing, therefore, is both an art and an act of governance, shaping thought and behavior as much as recording it. Tonight, as we reflect on religious texts and epic storytelling, I invite you to imagine the scribes at work, copying the Epic of Gilgamesh, inscribing prayers on temple walls, detailing the journeys of gods and heroes. Each line is an act of preservation, each symbol a thread in the tapestry of civilization. Writing elevates ephemeral speech into enduring culture, allowing human societies to transmit knowledge, codify values, and articulate the ineffable mysteries of existence. Through these texts, humans confront mortality, celebrate virtue, encode social order, and engage with the cosmos. Religious and epic writing also sets the stage for subsequent developments in literature, law, philosophy, and historical record. It demonstrates that writing is not simply utilitarian. It is expressive, moral, and cultural. These texts represent a continuum in human thought, from record-keeping to divination, from administration to storytelling, from temporal concerns to eternal questions. They are evidence of the human capacity to shape not only memory, but imagination, embedding ideology, spirituality, and cultural identity into the enduring medium of written symbols. As we prepare to move into Batch 8, which explores the education and scribal culture that allowed these texts to flourish, it becomes clear that religious texts and epic narratives are more than artifacts. They are the blueprint of civilization itself. Through them, we see writing's profound capacity to preserve culture, transmit ideology, and anchor societies across time, ensuring that myths, prayers, and legends remain alive for millennia. The narrative of human expression continues, linking learning, literacy, and creativity in an unbroken chain from the earliest scribes to the modern world. If writing is the backbone of civilization, then scribes are its heartbeat. Across ancient societies, from Sumer and Egypt to Shang China and the Indus Valley, the act of recording, preserving, and interpreting symbols fell to a select, disciplined few. These individuals were more than clerks. They were cultural custodians, the intellectual elite, entrusted with knowledge that shaped governance, religion, trade, and collective memory. To understand the transformative power of writing, one must understand the world of scribes, their education, daily life, and societal significance. In early Mesopotamia, for example, the training of a scribe was rigorous and lengthy. Young boys, often from privileged or specialized families, entered tablet schools known as edubas. Here they learned not just the thousands of cuneiform signs, but also the grammar, syntax, and arithmetic necessary to manage complex records. Education was strict and repetitive. Clay tablets were scratched and scratched again as students copied exemplary texts. Mistakes were punished, and mastery required patience, precision, and unwavering attention to detail. By the time a student completed training, they were capable of handling legal documents, commercial records, literary works, and religious inscriptions. These skills made them indispensable to kings, merchants, and priests alike. Egyptian scribal schools functioned similarly, though with a unique spiritual dimension. Students learned hieroglyphs, hieratic, and later demotic scripts, practicing on ostraca and papyrus. The instruction combined literacy, mathematics, and moral education, preparing students for careers in temples, palaces, and administrative offices. Mastery of writing conferred prestige. Scribes were trusted with sensitive knowledge, granted exemptions from manual labor, and often enjoyed stable positions within the bureaucratic machinery of the state. The profession was codified. In some cases, it was even hereditary. To become a scribe was to join an elite class, whose work both preserved and propagated cultural and political norms. In Shang China, the training of diviners and scribes was equally meticulous. Writing on oracle bones required precise incision and understanding of symbolic conventions. Students needed to grasp both the phonetic elements of characters and their ritual significance. Scribes were trained not only to write, but to interpret, to discern patterns in cracks, and to record outcomes accurately. Their literacy was an instrument of authority, linking the mortal and divine realms. Without scribes, the king's edicts, divinations, and ancestral communications would have no tangible record, underscoring their crucial societal role. Scribal culture was more than technical skill. It was a mindset, a worldview, and a form of social organization. Scribes were mediators between knowledge and power, memory and action. They controlled the flow of information, determined what was recorded and preserved, and ensured consistency in administration, law, and ritual. Their literacy was both functional and symbolic, signifying authority, trustworthiness, and intellectual prowess. In essence, the scribe was a linchpin, linking the abstract power of writing to concrete outcomes in society. The societal importance of literacy extended beyond governance and religion. In Mesopotamia, scribes preserved literary masterpieces such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, hymns, prayers, and proverbs. In Egypt, they copied religious texts, administrative records, and monumental inscriptions. In China, they recorded divinations, rituals, and historical events. Literacy was the vessel through which culture, ideology, and knowledge were transmitted across generations. Without scribes, human memory would have been ephemeral, confined to the oral traditions that degrade over time. Writing transformed society, but it was scribes who made that transformation tangible, reliable, and enduring. Schools for scribes were not uniform across civilizations, but common patterns emerge. Instruction combined rote memorization with hands-on practice, emphasizing repetition, precision, and internalization. Mistakes were costly, as an error in a legal record or ritual text could have significant consequences. Teachers served as both mentors and disciplinarians, ensuring that students absorbed not only the technical skills, but also the ethical and cultural norms embedded in their craft. In essence, scribal education was a form of societal indoctrination. Literacy came hand in hand with understanding the hierarchies, laws, and values of the civilization itself. Scribal culture also fostered social mobility, albeit limited. While the profession was often restricted to certain classes, it offered status, economic stability, and access to knowledge inaccessible to the majority. Scribes could rise within the bureaucracy, gain influence in temples, and even serve as advisors to rulers. Their literacy conferred authority and agency. In societies where most people were illiterate, scribes became the interpreters of law, record keepers of commerce, and mediators of culture. They were, in many ways, the invisible hands that held the machinery of civilization together. The work of scribes was both solitary and collaborative. Individual effort ensured accuracy and mastery, yet scribes often operated within larger bureaucratic or temple networks. They copied texts, verified records, and cross-referenced information, creating redundancies that preserved knowledge. Collaboration ensured continuity. Even if one scribe died or erred, the collective record endured. Through this system, writing became resilient, capable of transmitting complex information across time and space. Scribes transformed writing from a set of symbols into a living system that underpinned society. Education and scribal culture also had profound cultural ramifications. Through their work, scribes mediated between tradition and innovation. They preserved myths, legal codes, and religious texts, while adapting scripts to new contexts and evolving social needs. In doing so, they shaped cultural memory and national identity. Each tablet, inscription, or papyrus sheet they produced contributed to a shared understanding of law, morality, and history. Literacy was both a practical skill and a conduit for cultural continuity. Consider the broader cognitive implications. Training scribes required abstraction, pattern recognition, and symbolic reasoning. Students learned to internalize complex sequences of signs, interpret their meaning, and apply them in diverse contexts. This cognitive discipline not only enabled record-keeping, but also structured thought, fostering analytical, administrative, and creative capacities. Scribes were, in effect, architects of knowledge, translating human experience into enduring symbols, preserving collective understanding for generations yet unborn. I often imagine a day in the life of a scribe, copying administrative logs in Mesopotamia, reciting hieroglyphic lessons in Egypt, carving oracle inscriptions in Shang China. The meticulous repetition, the careful attention to form, the weight of responsibility. Each act was a form of both service and devotion. Scribes were the guardians of human memory, the invisible mediators between the ephemeral present and the enduring past. Their labor enabled societies to function, to flourish, and to project themselves into the future. Scribal culture was also a medium of social stratification. Literacy distinguished elite from commoner, priest from peasant, official from laborer. It was a marker of privilege and power, a gatekeeper to influence and opportunity. Yet it also codified societal values, ensuring that cultural norms, legal principles, and spiritual practices were transmitted consistently. The scribe was both a product and a perpetuator of civilization, a living link between human ingenuity and societal continuity. Tonight, as we reflect on education and scribal culture, it becomes evident that writing's impact extends far beyond mere symbols. Scribes shaped governance, commerce, ritual, and culture. They mediated between authority and memory, individual skill, and collective knowledge. Through their disciplined labor, writing became a durable, adaptable, and powerful tool, capable of recording history, codifying law, preserving myths, and sustaining civilization itself. As we prepare to move into Batch 9, which explores writing and urban identity, we see how literacy and scribal expertise influence the structure, symbolism, and cohesion of cities. Education and scribal culture provided the foundation upon which writing's societal power could be fully realized, embedding human thought, organization, and ideology into the very fabric of early civilization. As cities emerged in the ancient world, writing evolved beyond its functional role in administration and record-keeping. It became a symbol of civic identity, a marker of authority, and a tool for reinforcing social cohesion. From the bustling streets of Uruk to the orderly grid of Mohenjo-Daro, from the monumental temples of Thebes to the palaces of Shang China, inscriptions, tablets, and seals were not just instruments of communication. They were instruments of identity. Writing made cities intelligible to themselves, codifying their values, celebrating their achievements, and asserting the power of their rulers. In Mesopotamia, city-states such as Uruk, Ur, and Lagash relied on writing to distinguish themselves from neighboring centers. Administrative tablets recorded taxes, labor contributions, and trade, but they also frequently included the names of kings, deities, and local institutions. Each tablet was a microcosm of civic life, reflecting not only economic transactions, but the authority of rulers and the legitimacy of their governance. Writing, in this sense, became a visible emblem of urban order, a medium through which citizens and outsiders alike recognized the structure, organization, and identity of the city. Consider the monumental inscriptions carved into temple walls and city gates. In Egypt, hieroglyphs proclaimed the accomplishments of pharaohs, narrated victories, and sanctified sacred spaces. The very act of inscribing these texts was performative. It displayed the ruler's power, reinforced religious ideology, and communicated civic values to both literate and illiterate observers. The city itself became a canvas, its urban spaces intertwined with writing that declared identity, hierarchy, and cultural memory. Writing was not confined to private or administrative use. It became public, performative, and deeply embedded in the urban landscape. Urban identity was further reinforced through seals, stamps, and standardized inscriptions. In the Indus Valley, the repeated motifs on seals, animals, geometric patterns, and abstract signs served as markers of trade networks, communal norms, and municipal authority. Even if the script itself remains undeciphered, the uniformity and repetition suggest a shared civic identity recognized across multiple cities. Each seal, each impressed tablet, carried the weight of communal agreement, a testament to collective recognition of urban governance, commerce, and cultural coherence. Writing also helped organize and communicate civic law. In Sumer, codified legal texts, such as the later Hammurabi Code, were displayed publicly to instruct citizens and assert the legitimacy of governance. These inscriptions communicated authority and order, embedding social norms into the material fabric of the city. Laws carved in stone or inscribed on tablets became enduring symbols of civic identity, providing continuity across generations and reinforcing the notion that the city was governed by rules both human and divine. Literacy, while limited to scribes and elites, radiated through society via public inscriptions, influencing behavior and creating a shared understanding of rights, duties, and responsibilities. The physical placement of writing within urban space further amplified its power. Temples, palaces, marketplaces, and public squares became sites of inscription, integrating text into everyday life. Citizens encountering these symbols were constantly reminded of civic structures, religious authority, and communal values. In this way, writing was not merely functional, it was performative, a subtle yet persistent assertion of identity. The city, through its scripts, told its own story, narrating its values, achievements, and governance to all who entered or lived within its walls. In Shang China, inscriptions on bronze vessels, oracle bones, and monumental architecture served a similar purpose. Writing legitimized the authority of rulers, codified ritual practice, and reinforced communal identity. The visual and symbolic weight of characters carved into these objects communicated permanence, hierarchy, and civic pride. Writing was a medium through which the city-state articulated itself, creating a sense of shared space, shared history, and shared destiny among its inhabitants. Urban identity was also intertwined with religious ideology. Temples, shrines, and sacred precincts frequently contained inscriptions detailing donations, rituals, and divine sanction. Writing established a dialogue between the city, its rulers, and the divine. Civic cohesion was maintained through this interplay. Citizens recognized the authority of rulers not only through force or tradition, but through the recorded endorsement of higher powers. Writing, therefore, functioned as a bridge linking social order, spiritual belief, and urban identity. Trade and economic activity also contributed to urban identity through writing. Standardized measures, seals, and transaction records allowed cities to operate efficiently while asserting control over production, distribution, and exchange. In the Indus Valley and Mesopotamia, city-states could distinguish themselves economically through these systems, ensuring that commerce reinforced civic identity as much as it facilitated wealth. Written records validated the authority of merchants, the reliability of marketplaces, and the legitimacy of urban institutions. Education and literacy reinforced these patterns. The training of scribes ensured that knowledge of writing, including its civic applications, was transmitted reliably. Schools and apprenticeships created a cadre of skilled individuals capable of maintaining urban administration, recording religious and cultural narratives, and enforcing legal structures. Through these literate professionals, writing became not only a practical tool, but a living thread that connected citizens to the city's identity, its past, and its institutional structures. I often imagine a day in an ancient city, scribes copying tablets in a bustling courtyard, merchants sealing goods for trade, priests inscribing rituals in temples, and citizens encountering these marks as part of daily life. Every etched character or pressed seal contributed to a larger narrative. The city was organized, lawful, divinely sanctioned, and culturally coherent. Writing was the invisible architecture of urban identity, providing structure to the physical city while also shaping perception, behavior, and allegiance. The relationship between writing and urban identity also had a temporal dimension. Inscriptions preserved memory, commemorated victories, recorded donations, and documented civic decisions. This archival function allowed cities to project themselves into the future, ensuring that identity and authority were not fleeting but enduring. By connecting past achievements, current governance, and projected aspirations, writing created a continuous narrative of civic pride and cultural cohesion. Furthermore, writing enabled comparison and distinction between cities. Standardized scripts and symbols allowed one city to differentiate itself from others while participating in broader regional networks. In Mesopotamia, the repeated use of certain royal titles, city-specific seals, and temple inscriptions marked one urban center as distinct from another. In the Indus Valley, uniform yet unique symbols communicated both local identity and regional connectivity. Writing served simultaneously as a marker of uniqueness and a tool for integration. Through these lenses, it becomes clear that writing was not merely a tool for communication or administration. It was a medium through which cities asserted themselves, articulated power, and maintained cohesion. Urban identity was encoded, inscribed, and made tangible through symbols that were at once functional, ideological, and aesthetic. Every tablet, seal, inscription, and monumental text contributed to a complex narrative, shaping how citizens understood their place in the city and how outsiders recognized its authority. As we conclude this batch, the link between writing and urban identity sets the stage for our final exploration. A comparative perspective on writing across civilizations. How did these systems, though diverse in form and purpose, collectively shape human society? How did literacy, scribal culture, and inscriptions facilitate the creation of complex, cohesive urban centers that could endure across millennia? The story of writing, from tokens to cuneiform, hieroglyphs, oracle bones, and seals, is a story of human ingenuity, societal organization, and the enduring power of symbols to define identity, structure society, and preserve culture. Across the ancient world, the written word emerged as both a tool and a revelation, a mirror of civilization itself. Yet what is remarkable is not only that so many societies invented writing, but that they did so independently. From the banks of the Tigris to the Nile, from the Indus Valley to the Yellow River, 4 distinct writing traditions rose, each shaped by geography, culture, and worldview. Together, they tell a story of humanity's most powerful invention, the capacity to store thought beyond the living mind. In Sumer, writing was born of bureaucracy and necessity. The earliest clay tablets from Uruk were not poetry or prophecy. They were tallies of grain, livestock, and labor. The cuneiform system evolved from pictographs into abstract wedges pressed by a stylus, reflecting an astonishing cognitive leap. Humans were beginning to think symbolically in ways that could be preserved, multiplied, and standardized. As the Sumerian city-states grew, so did the uses of writing. Kings and priests required scribes to maintain records, temples documented offerings, and merchants logged transactions that stretched across Mesopotamia. Language became power, and cuneiform became the language of order. In Egypt, hieroglyphs were born not from commerce but from divinity. Writing was an art of the sacred, a visual theology carved into temple walls and tombs. The Egyptians saw words as living forces. The hieroglyphic signs for life, rebirth, and eternity echoed their entire religious cosmos. Where Sumerian clay spoke of trade and labor, Egyptian stone spoke of the gods and the afterlife. Yet beneath the religious grandeur lay an equally intricate administrative machinery. Papyrus scrolls recorded taxes, laws, and agricultural yields, while tomb inscriptions immortalized deeds and lineage. The same civilization that worshipped words also weaponized them, to rule, to preserve, to command remembrance. The Indus Valley, by contrast, remains a whisper in archaeology's vast silence. The so-called proto-Indus script, verify, carved onto seals and pottery shards, hints at an advanced, literate urban world. The brevity of the inscriptions, often just a few symbols, suggests they might have marked ownership, trade goods, or religious affiliations. Yet their true meaning remains locked away, undeciphered. Without a bilingual key, the voice of the Indus cannot yet be heard. Still, what we can infer from the archaeological record is profound. Urban planning, standardized brick sizes, and far-reaching trade networks all point to complex governance. Whether or not they possessed full writing as we define it, their symbols embody a shared human instinct to encode meaning, to organize reality through sign and mark. In Shang China, writing was born in fire and bone. Oracle bones, turtle shells, and ox scapulae carried the earliest Chinese inscriptions, etched by diviners who sought the will of ancestors and gods. The questions they inscribed about war, harvest, childbirth, or sacrifice offer a raw glimpse into the concerns of a Bronze Age court. Unlike the Indus symbols, the oracle bone script can be traced forward. It evolved directly into later Chinese characters, creating one of the world's few unbroken writing lineages. Here, writing served as both ritual and record, a fusion of spirituality and statecraft that anchored dynastic legitimacy. Despite their differences, these civilizations shared certain unifying themes. Writing arose in response to complexity, to the challenge of governing, trading, and remembering within large, structured societies. It often began as a tool of elites, scribes, priests, and kings who needed control over knowledge. In each region, literacy was rare and precious, confined to institutions of power. Writing also functioned as a technology of immortality. By fixing speech into durable form, stone, clay, bone, human beings achieved something unprecedented, the power to communicate with the future. Yet there were deep divergences too, philosophical, aesthetic, and social. In Mesopotamia, writing grew increasingly abstract, emphasizing efficiency over beauty. In Egypt, hieroglyphs retained their pictorial elegance, blurring the boundary between art and script. In China, writing evolved toward moral and philosophical expression. In the Indus Valley, we find mystery and restraint, a civilization that left no decipherable narrative yet spoke through urban design and iconography. These contrasts reveal that writing was not a single invention, but a constellation of inventions, each culture discovering its own path to permanence. The materials themselves shaped their destinies. Clay was durable but heavy, ideal for archiving but not transport. Papyrus allowed mobility, spreading ideas across borders but decaying over time. Bone and shell, used in China, tied writing to divination, merging technology and theology. Every medium carried a worldview. In Egypt, a scroll was a vessel for eternal life. In Sumer, a tablet was a ledger of accountability. In China, a bone was a message to the cosmos. Another key divergence lay in the relationship between writing and speech. In Sumer, written language quickly departed from the spoken tongue, becoming a formal system that transcended dialect. Egyptian hieroglyphs combined phonetic and ideographic elements, reflecting both the sounds and the ideas of language. Chinese characters, too, would retain this hybrid nature, flexible, layered, capable of spanning centuries. The Indus script-esque brevity suggests something else entirely, perhaps a code or emblematic shorthand rather than phonetic writing. This diversity underscores how adaptable the human mind was in forging systems that could store meaning beyond sound. Culturally, writing also mirrored attitudes toward history and time. In Mesopotamia, kings chronicled conquests and construction projects, asserting continuity through narrative. The Epic of Gilgamesh, preserved in cuneiform, became both literature and memory, a myth of human mortality etched into clay. Egypt's writing preserved eternity itself, freezing divine order in stone. China's oracle bones, by contrast, preserved uncertainty. Each inscription was a question, a fragment of anxiety cast toward the divine. Even the undeciphered seals of the Indus may represent a culture that valued order and anonymity over ego, where the collective identity mattered more than the individual name. Trade and cultural contact further complicated the picture. Mesopotamian scribes influenced Elam and Persia, Egyptian scripts inspired neighboring Nubia, and Chinese writing informed Korea and Japan centuries later. The concept of writing traveled even when the scripts did not. The idea that symbols could transcend speech, that they could be shared, copied, and adapted, was itself revolutionary. Civilization became a network of scripts, a silent dialogue across time and space. Ultimately, what unites these traditions is their shared aspiration to defy forgetting. Whether through wedge or glyph, seal or bone, every mark was an act of defiance against oblivion. Writing did not merely record events, it transformed them. It created history where before there had only been memory. It turned oral tradition into artifact, myth into manuscript, administration into archive. The first writers, knowingly or not, invented permanence. When we compare Sumer, Egypt, Indus, and Shang, we are not just comparing scripts. We are comparing visions of what it means to exist. To write was to create order out of chaos, presence out of absence. And in that act, humanity crossed a threshold it would never return from. As these civilizations inscribed their worlds into permanence, they also laid the groundwork for something even greater: the measurement of time itself. For to record a harvest was to mark a season. To note a flood was to chart a cycle. Writing did not just preserve the past, it pointed toward the future. And so, as we close this chapter on the birth of writing, we look toward the next great invention of human consciousness: the calendar. The ancient scribes who tallied grain and spoke to gods through bone and clay were also the first astronomers, gazing upward to find rhythm in the stars. As we draw the curtains on this exploration of writing's origins, it is impossible not to marvel at the breadth of its impact. What began as simple marks on clay, bone, or stone, tokens counting livestock, inscriptions on oracle bones, or hieroglyphic symbols on temple walls, rapidly evolved into the scaffolding of civilization itself. Writing did not merely record human activity, it transformed how humans conceptualized themselves, their societies, and even the passage of time. From the earliest cuneiform tablets in Sumer to Egyptian hieroglyphs, proto-Indus inscriptions, and Shang oracle bones, we see a continuous thread, writing as a bridge between memory, administration, belief, and ultimately, measurement. Consider the functional utility of writing in the earliest cities. Administrative records documented trade, taxes, labor obligations, and inventories of resources. These seemingly mundane records were not simply bureaucratic tools. They structured human activity in ways that made complex societies possible. By encoding transactions, agreements, and rules in a durable medium, writing extended the reach of memory beyond individual minds and ephemeral oral traditions. It created a collective memory that could transcend lifetimes, ensuring continuity, accountability, and societal stability. Writing enabled humans to anchor their actions in a temporal framework, preserving cause and effect, and establishing a precedent for the future. But writing was not solely a tool of administration, it was deeply intertwined with human imagination and belief. Religious texts, epic narratives, and prayers preserved moral, spiritual, and cultural frameworks. By inscribing myths and rituals, early scribes codified shared ideals and worldviews. These inscriptions were performative. They shaped behavior, reinforced social hierarchies, and linked citizens to the divine and cosmic order. Writing allowed humans to externalize thought, converting ephemeral oral stories into enduring cultural memory. This externalization created a space for reflection, interpretation, and adaptation. An intellectual laboratory where human societies could refine concepts of law, morality, and identity across generations. The evolution of writing also set the stage for one of humanity's most ambitious undertakings, measuring and understanding time. Calendars, lunar and solar cycles, and seasonal patterns were not only observed but systematically recorded. In Mesopotamia, scribes tracked lunar months, harvest cycles, and river flooding. In Egypt, the annual inundation of the Nile was documented with precision, allowing for planning and ritual observance. In China, oracle bones sometimes recorded celestial events, linking human activity to the rhythms of the cosmos. Writing thus became the bridge between the abstract and the tangible, the human and the cosmic. It allowed civilizations to encode patterns, make predictions, and exert a semblance of control over the environment. Writing's role in the development of timekeeping is especially profound. By recording events, rulers, and astronomical observations, scribes created the first chronological frameworks. These frameworks were not merely practical, they were conceptual, shaping how humans understood causality, change, and permanence. The act of recording dates, sequences, and celestial phenomena converted time from a continuous, flowing experience into a structured system that could be analyzed, compared, and transmitted. This abstraction of time laid the foundation for astronomy, mathematics, and the scientific observation of natural phenomena, illustrating how literacy catalyzed intellectual advancement. Moreover, writing allowed civilizations to link memory and measurement in ways that oral traditions alone could not. Tokens and tablets quantified goods and labor, inscriptions tracked ceremonial and civic events, and astronomical notations recorded celestial cycles. Each mark was both mnemonic and analytical, a fusion of record-keeping and interpretation. This dual function illustrates writing's versatility. It was simultaneously a repository of human experience and a tool for shaping understanding. By externalizing memory, civilizations could project foresight, plan infrastructure, regulate agriculture, and synchronize collective action, all essential for urban complexity and societal resilience. We also see writing's enduring symbolic and performative power in its capacity to assert authority and identity. Inscriptions legitimized kings, priests, and governing elites, linking political power to divine or moral sanction. Monumental texts, temple carvings, and public proclamations communicated civic and religious norms to all who could read, or at least observe, the symbols. Writing was not neutral. It codified ideology, reinforced hierarchy, and projected societal values outward into both the physical and cultural landscape. In this sense, writing became a mechanism for social cohesion, uniting citizens through shared knowledge, rituals, and narratives. Across these civilizations, we also observe the interdependence of writing and urban identity. Cities became literate spaces, with inscriptions, seals, and monumental texts embedded in their architecture. Writing organized civic life, reinforced hierarchy, and connected individuals to the city's collective narrative. It defined boundaries, encoded laws, and projected authority across space and time. Urban cohesion depended upon literacy, whether through professional scribes managing administration or monumental inscriptions shaping perception. Writing was the invisible architecture underpinning the tangible structures of civilization. Scribal culture, education, and apprenticeship ensured that writing could fulfill this complex role. Trained scribes carried the burden of knowledge, mastering scripts, record-keeping, literary tradition, and ritual practice. Literacy was both a technical skill and a social instrument. Scribes mediated between the ephemeral and the permanent, transforming memory into an enduring medium. Their labor allowed writing to function as a bridge, linking human experience to cosmic observation, societal order to personal action, and the ephemeral present to a lasting historical record. From a broader perspective, writing's emergence illustrates a profound human aspiration, the desire to communicate across time and space, to preserve knowledge, and to impose order upon the complexity of life. It enabled humans to externalize thought, encode memory, regulate society, and interpret the cosmos. Writing is simultaneously pragmatic and poetic, utilitarian and ideological, functional and symbolic. It is one of humanity's first tools of abstraction, allowing the tangible world to intersect with imagination, reflection, and inquiry. In reflecting on the journey from early tokens to cuneiform, hieroglyphs, proto-Indus symbols, and oracle bones, one sees a trajectory of increasing sophistication, complexity, and integration. Writing begins as a practical tool for accounting, trade, and divination. It evolves into a medium for governance, codifying law, ritual, and social norms. It becomes a canvas for epic storytelling, religious thought, and cultural memory. And finally, it extends into the abstraction of time, celestial observation, and chronological record, setting the stage for astronomy and mathematics. Each stage builds upon the last, demonstrating writing's adaptability and its centrality to the development of civilization. As we prepare to turn our attention to the next episode, we will explore how writing laid the foundation for the measurement of time, the observation of celestial patterns, and the codification of calendars. From the predictable inundation of the Nile to the lunar cycles of Mesopotamia, early civilizations leveraged their literacy to impose temporal order upon their environment. Writing, which once captured commerce and ritual, now becomes a lens through which humans observe and structure the cosmos itself. The leap from memory to measurement is profound, a testament to the ingenuity of early scribes and the enduring power of the written word. Tonight, as we close this chapter, it is worth imagining the first scribes tracing symbols into clay, carving lines onto bone, or painting hieroglyphs on temple walls. Each mark is a bridge between thought and permanence, between human ambition and divine mystery, between memory and the unfolding patterns of time. Writing enabled civilizations to endure, to plan, and to understand. It is the tool through which humanity first grasped the past, navigated the present, and glimpsed the future. And with that, we are ready to move forward, from the origins of writing to the earliest measures of time. The calendars, lunar cycles, and astronomical observations that will define our understanding of the heavens, structure human activity, and shape the very rhythm of ancient life. Writing, memory, and measurement converge, setting the stage for the next episode in our journey through Sleepless Timelines.